let's go ahead and deep dive on the Clemson-Florida State game. So you mentioned that Clemson didn't look so good, and certainly has merit. They struggled once they moved the ball, but didn't cash in 7 field goal attempts, which is outrageous. 2 of them blocked, but made the other 5. So 5 made field goals was, the bulk of the story in the game, really. Just moving the ball at will and then not punching it in. In a way, I thought this was a better performance than last week against Stanford. Stanford, they won 40-14, but they allowed Stanford to run the ball at will on the edge, and then they just kind of hoped that for no reason at all, Stanford would decide to pass in the red zone, which they did, and they threw just silly turnovers, interceptions that were like any team would pick those off. They were just so bad. Obviously, Clemson has elite starting cornerback duo, which helps. But I thought this, in terms of they moved the ball at will, they didn't punch it in as much, but it wasn't so turnover aided or dumb decision aided. I thought they earned more, and I thought it was more impressive. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. And again, I think also just, going on the road is always going to be tough. And I had weird feelings about this game all week because everybody was saying, everybody's counting Florida State out. And, even with all the construction, Doak Campbell's still a tough place to play. So the fact that Clemson was able to go in, like you said, move the ball at will, come away with a 16-point win, like I'm happy with that. The red zone play calling was a little just concerning because it's just it's something that we thought we had gotten past. We thought we'd gotten to a point where we weren't going to have these kind of issues, and they're kind of rearing their heads. But it will be interesting to see sort of what this offense, how they respond against Wake. Not a very good team, as we've talked about. And I think also a good thing to remember is this team's dealing with some injuries, and I don't think Brian Westco has been healthy. He didn't really have too many. I think he had 1 or 2 catches in this game. Great game from TJ Moore. He had an awesome touchdown. Tyler Brown, we're still waiting to kind of see him back. And obviously Antonio Williams is definitely the best receiver. Adam Randall, got to give a shout out to him. He was like dressed and available to play in this game. They fortunately didn't need him, but that's really impressive from him to fight through that broken toe like he has. But I think when I look at it, the fact that Clemson was able to move the ball with a lot of the backups kind of in, that's a good sign. Again, frustrated with the red zone. Maybe I feel a little different if we don't give up the 2 block kicks, and this is this, instead of being a 16-point win, it's a 22-point win. Maybe my perception is a little different, but yeah, just it wasn't the best performance. But again, the fact that Clemson can kind of have an off game and still come away like that is very encouraging.
Yeah, I was encouraged that Peter Woods came back, limited snap count, but I don't totally credit Woods for this because Florida State's bad at running the ball just against everyone. But Clemson only allowed 22 rushing yards after what happened against Stanford. That was encouraging to see. It was 500 versus 250 in terms of total yardage. Really impressive for Clemson there. Just, thoroughly dominated in that regard, something they didn't do the week before. The offense was still explosive. First time they're doing it on the road in a neutral site against Georgia. They were not explosive. They had plays of 59, 57, 27, 25, and 24 to Josh Sapp on a ridiculous, you have almost no window play there. So still explosive. What stood out to me, and I'm curious if you picked this up, I imagine you'll agree, but I'm not sure how obvious this was. It was watching Florida State, even without DJ, looked exactly like our last 3 years watching Clemson. The receivers didn't get a lot of separation. The rare times they did, they dropped it. They have good running backs, but their offensive line can't rush block, so that's a waste. And their quarterback doesn't attack downfield a ton. Brock Glenn, I thought, made some real NFL throws, but they tried to go sideways more and take some pressure off him. But it was just like watching us and all the pains we went through now on our arch rival. I was like, this is kind of fun. And then we're the opposite. We're explosive again with all these big-time plays doing exactly what TCU did when Garrett Riley was there. It was just a weird, role reversal kind of thing that I enjoyed.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, FSU very similar offensively to what we had kind of gotten used to with Clemson. And I imagine with some of the play calling not attacking that deep as much, it's some of it just you got a young quarterback. This is his first start of the year. They probably called it a little bit more conservatively. We'll kind of watch Brock throughout the year and see what he does. But man, they had some pretty bad drops, and really some drops that they make it. Maybe this is a little bit of a different game, but just a team that can't get out of their own way. It seems like I was impressed. I know their offensive line ain't great, but I was impressed by what Clemson's defensive line did. I mean, the 22 rushing yards is impressive, and it seemed like almost any time they ran the ball, he was getting met at the line of scrimmage, and at best falling forward for a yard or two. But definitely just shut that down, and you hope to see a little bit. You hope to see the defensive backs get a little bit better. They had a few busts that led to some big plays, but yeah, really, I mean, solid outing from the defense, definitely.
Yeah, speaking of that, I thought I noticed Sheldon Lewis a couple times just in the past couple games getting beat, but I think Avion Terrell certainly, and also Jalen Lucas. That's an outstanding starting duo. Did you catch eyes on that?
Yeah. Lucas is great. Avion Terrell, I think, is going to end up finishing his career as one of the best cornerbacks in the country. I think he might actually be better than his brother. Just a really, really solid cornerback. I think, a lot of what we're seeing with some of the busts is just Clemson's got some young talent on defensive back. I mean, Shelton Lewis, only a sophomore. Sherrod Coble's a guy this is his first year getting a lot of big snaps. And it's like, I think you and I have talked about this in the past before. It's a weird time for Clemson because even your older guys that didn't necessarily who were backups the past few years, who didn't get a lot of snaps, it's not like it was in the old days where Clemson used to get, this year it is. The past 3 years were not like the old days where Clemson was getting all their backups, averaging like two quarters worth of snaps in a game because you're blowing everybody out. You've got pretty much an entire class that did not get that kind of, those kind of reps. And I think we're seeing a little bit of that. And now that Clemson looks to be back at this level, and that we're seeing, against App State and against NC State, put in like over 90 players in each of those games. I think against NC, I think one of those games they even may have put in over 100. I hope that we can continue to see that, and I think that's going to be huge for continuing to rebuild this program back to what we expect, is that you have these guys that they've been here, maybe 2, maybe 3 years, that they've at least gotten, a lot of the reps. I think we're seeing some guys in that defensive backfield having to learn on the job a little more.
Yeah, I think I think it's pretty clear that getting those extra reps makes a big difference. I think it's huge, and I think it'll pay dividends moving forward. That's something that helps about being in the ACC. You're not grinding every week where your easier game is Kentucky, which is still going to be tough. Right now, your easier game is like Stanford, and you're able to get these guys experience that really pays off. Maybe one of the biggest things from this game or most encouraging things was the physical run game. Clemson, especially later in the game, just turned to Phil Mafah and said, Can you just end this for us? And there wasn't a ton of explosive plays. It was just eating them up. And then towards the very end, there was the huge long run that sort of ended any hope that they had. But he came into the game with only 43 carries on the season for 342 yards, which is great. That's 8 yards a carry. But he had 154 yards on a season high 25 carries. So now he's up to almost 500 through 5 games, which is almost 100 per game. So love seeing that from him.
Yeah, it's been a good year for Phil, but it feels like a quiet year just because I think everybody's talking about how much better the passing game is. Last year he was kind of the main show on offense, whereas it sort of feels like this season we've kind of overlooked him, but he's having a great year. As I said, kind of quietly a good year, and he was huge for Clemson in this game.
So let's quickly talk about Brock Glenn. You mentioned him a little bit in the ACC Power Rankings video. Folks who are not watching this live and watching this recording later, go check out the YouTube channel to watch those ACC Power Rankings. I thought he was good, man. I thought he's got to be your starting quarterback the rest of the year. I thought he showed a lot of moxie, a lot of guts, and made some NFL kind of throws. Did he impress you as much?
Yeah, I was very impressed, and I think if you're Mike Norvell, I think somebody needs to ask this question of when DJ started to struggle earlier in the season. I understand why DJ is your starter going into the season. He was a big time getting the transfer portal. I get that. But I think when he started to struggle, you kind of have to ask the question of, okay, why did it take him getting hurt before you finally put Brock Glenn in when Brock Glenn looks better right now? I mean, he looks like a better quarterback and looks like, and I think the other end of that too is that you're building for the future. DJ does not have another year at Florida State, even if he, unless there's the red shirt and all that. But if he's your starter for the rest of the season, that's it. And at this point, you're not making a bowl game, so why not let this guy come in again, try to see if you pick up a few wins here or there, get some upsets, and build for the future? Because I think Brock Glenn is a guy that could be a big factor for Florida State in the next few years.
Yeah, and coming into this game, I was kind of wondering, is DJ is this an injury that normally you would play through, but he needs to be benched, and they're kind of just being nice and saying he's too hurt to play. And then you see him in a pretty big cast, so I tend to believe it. But yeah, I mean, you can't go back to him. This season, all your goals are off the table now. The only thing to play for is building. It's almost like a pro sports team. Just get the draft pick, play young guys. It's almost, obviously you'd rather win in college sports. There's no draft pick, but you might as well make a youth movement and build those guys up. Because if the team's no good, and if you're going to leave because you're graduating or whatever, it doesn't really matter anymore, right? So couldn't agree with you more here. Kevin also agrees in the comments saying, yeah, Norvell has a lot to answer about in that QB position. Maybe a game or two late making the switch. Yeah, so impressive by him. So kind of to wrap on this, so after the win, Clemson went from 15th to 10th in the power rankings, jumping Missouri, Michigan, and Southern Cal or USC, who all lost. And then also jumping LSU and Notre Dame, who are off this week. I kind of think 10th, maybe I'd probably even have them as above Miami, obviously by my power rating. So I might even have them like 8th-ish. I don't know that they would. I don't think I'd pick them to beat like a Texas or an Ohio State or a Penn State or a Georgia. Probably not Alabama. Maybe not Oregon, right? So I don't know if I'd put them in that very top tier. But I'd pick them over Ole Miss or LSU or Notre Dame, maybe Tennessee, and I'd pick them over Miami or SMU in a championship game. So, I mean, that's like, they're a legit playoff team, and not just because of a weak ACC or some buys. Are you thinking of them in that same sort of tiering?
Yeah, and I think absolutely, especially when you see kind of how Tennessee's offense really got shut down by Arkansas, not a great Arkansas team. I think Clemson's better than them. I feel like 10. I think 10 makes sense when you see the way that the AP voters have voted throughout the year. I wasn't expecting us to go above 10, but I also think Clemson's probably better than 10th. I think, you start looking at 8th, 7th. Yeah, I think that's absolutely a conversation you have, because this is really a team that looks like a legit playoff team, looks like probably the best team in the ACC, and I think a team that, could really show a lot of teams, could really give a lot of teams fits in the playoffs.
Yeah, maybe the only team that I am a little bit bothered, not even bothered because it doesn't matter, but it's odd to me that they're behind Ole Miss, following Ole Miss's loss, and they don't really have, they blew out, but they beat a bunch of bad teams. I guess, Clemson could say the same, right? They blew out a bunch of mediocre teams, but their loss is to Georgia. So let's go ahead and end here on the Florida State. Let's go ahead and shift gears, and let's do a very brief preview of the Wake Forest game. So Wake Forest had the big rivalry win against NC State in Raleigh. So all of a sudden they're buoyed, their spirits are up just in time to host Clemson, which is just lovely. They were awful last year. I mean, they were just bad across the board. They came to Clemson. Clemson played like an F game and still won. One of the worst games I've seen Clemson play, quite frankly, and they still won because Wake was just completely hapless. Well, they got Hank Bachmeier from Louisiana Tech. Most people remember him from Boise State. He's been pretty good. They got Donovan Green back from injury to pair with Taylor Marin at wide receiver. That's a pretty good wide receiver core. The defense is bad. We'll talk about that. but it seems like they fixed the offense. Your thoughts on the matchup overall?
Yeah, and I think we need to reiterate with Wake Forest. I mean, they have a loss to Louisiana, not Louisiana State, not Louisiana Tech. Like the Raging Cajuns came into Winston-Salem and beat them. So they're really, they're a team that is struggling. I think this is very much a good opportunity for another sort of get right game for Clemson, where Clemson can really do some things, work on some things, get some young guys in. I imagine with Wake being down, it'll be kind of like it's been in years past, where we'll probably have half the stadium in orange. Definitely, I just think a huge opportunity more for Clemson to get better and to kind of get people a little more confident. I think you could see it, kind of like how you felt after the NC State game. You're like, man, this offense is really good. I think this could be another opportunity for that for Clemson.
Yeah, and to your point, so Clemson's defense, in terms of total defense, not points, only ranks 80th, 371 yards per game allowed. Not great. Wake Forest offense, 46th, which sounds only so-so, but when you're the upper half tends to be fairly close. 431 yards per game, pretty good. So you'd think they could score, just by the raw stats, you think they could put up some points. But when you flip it over, Clemson on offense is 19th, 460 per game. That's great. And Wake's defense is abysmal, 124th in total defense, 460 yards allowed. So that is a bad defense. And to your point, they gave up 31 at home in a comeback victory for Virginia. They gave up 40 at home in a blowout loss to Ole Miss. They gave up 41 in a home loss to Louisiana. Just really, really bad. Even in their win at NC State, they still gave up 30 to a really bad NC State offense. So I think that is an opportunity for Clemson to put up like 50 on them.
Yeah, I really think this will be a good opportunity for Clemson to flex its muscles, have a little fun, and kind of after 2 weeks of not having your necessarily best offensive performances, this really could be a good opportunity to get back to that. Hopefully we get to see a lot of snaps for Chris Vizina. That's been very nice this year, getting to see him in that backup role continue to grow. Although he did get one snap in the Florida State game when Cade took the hit shot to the head, but hopefully we see that. I'm excited about seeing Jay Haynes continue to grow. I think because this is Phil Moffa's last year, so Haynes is going to be probably your guy next year. So that's the thing with these games, that if it does turn into the blowout that we're thinking and kind of hoping that it is going to be, that's why I get excited about these games, is because all right, I get to see the future. I get to see who, I get to kind of get a preview of what we're going to look at next year. So excited about that. Hopefully, again, it's a game where Clemson can kind of come in, do like they did against NC State, put up 28 in the first quarter and never look back. And it should be that kind of game, hopefully.
Yeah. It's funny. 5 years ago, a lot of people were kind of sick of these games are totally non-competitive. Now it's like, I hope it's not competitive so I could see the backups, because that's fun too. So it's just funny how that perspective changes. A couple of final comments here. Hank Bachmeier, their new quarterback, he has 7 touchdowns to only 2 interceptions, 1,313 passing yards, 7.5 yards per attempt, pretty solid. Klubnik, a bit better, 14 touchdowns, only 2 picks, really, really impressive. So double the TDs for the same picks, 1,219 passing yards, but on fewer attempts. So he's averaging 8.5 yards per attempt, which is outstanding. He was just awful on yards per attempt last year, but he's just being so aggressive this year. It's a totally different quarterback. And then at running back, Maffa, 7.3 yards per carry with 2 touchdowns. Damon Claiborne, 471 yards in the year, averaging almost 6 yards a carry, and has 6 touchdowns. So I agree with you. Clemson's offense should just roll and put up 50. But let's see Clemson's defense is only 80th nationally in total yards against at least a decent offense. Claiborne's been good at running back. Bachmeier's been good at quarterback, and they've got good receivers. I tend to think that the slow mesh doesn't work well against really good defensive tackles, which Clemson has. So I'm not too worried about it. I think Clemson's going to shut it down, but it'll be a good test.
Yeah, I think the big thing I'm looking at again is just, you're right, they've got some talented receivers. How does our defensive backs respond after not their best game against Florida State? I think the defensive line, as we've seen in the years past against Wake and the slow mesh, shouldn't have too many issues. But that's really what I'm going to be watching. Is just how these young defensive backs respond. Because that's what's going to be the difference between this being a 50-10 game versus a 50-40 game.
Yep. I agree. Hey, thanks for joining. I appreciate you. Folks can find Matt's work over at Shaking the Southland. Matt, thanks for doing this.
Yeah, absolutely. Always love to come on.
If you enjoyed this video, please help this channel by liking the video, subscribing, and leaving a comment. Also, if you're a pet owner and you live in the upstate, check out our sponsor, Ready Vets. They offer immediate walk-in care when your pet can't wait. They're open 7 days a week till 10 p.m. They're owned by 2 Clemson grads. They're located in Taylor's, just 10 miles from the Woodruff Road shopping district.